Adam, would you mind making me a co-host so I can present? Right. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. Thank you, Brian. I'm hoping that Adam can make me a co-host in a second, and we'll get started. Not I can't present anything until I get that kind of admin. There we go. All right. Well, we're about 5 minutes in, so let's go ahead and get started. I'm sure others will trickle in as time has it. Chair, Joshua. For those of you who are hearing me for the second time today, I apologize. I'm sure it's not how you'd like to spend your day. Karen hardly does. Anyway, so we're going to start in chapter 15 today. If things go the way I expect them to, we'll probably reach chapter 20, and next week we will probably finish Joshua with chapters 21 through 24. But we'll see how it is. So in chapter 15, we begin to see the land of the Canaanites carved up. And we begin by talking about the tribe of Judah and its borders and especially landmarks that are in the area. And for us, these locations and this information is not that it's difficult to then go, yes, this is paramount for us. But for the Jewish people at the time who had conquered this land and needed to record it so that they understood where you know where their inheritance lied, this was of great importance to them. I've included a map here, and this can kind of help us see how it's carved up. Judah is down here in a large pink swath going all the way up from Jericho and Gilgal, past the Salt Sea, and down all the way to a mountain range of Hormah and Zephtha. So they have received a massive portion of land. And we continue talking about these things when we reach discussing Caleb in chapter 13. In verse 13. Now in chapter 14, we had talked about how Caleb went boldly up and said, "I want to conquer the giants, the people who scared Jerusalem before we ever came in, and I want to conquer that for myself." And God is impressed by this brazenness and says, and grants him that peace. So even at 85 years old, he's encouraged to go out and to conquer, and he does exactly that. So Caleb, here we return to him, and his sons begin getting their portions of land, and he is conquering everything. Caleb has this immense ferocity and takes exactly what he knows is his because he believed in the Lord in the first place, and he felt that they could conquer it. And here we see that his faith has not wavered at all, and now he's absolutely ready and biting at the bit to do this. And he marries off his daughters in 16 and 17. Now his Caleb himself was this guy of bold deeds, and his daughter is his daughter is exactly the same way. She comes up and says, "You've given me a south land, but I also want these springs of water, and I want these springs of water as well." So she imitates her father's boldness and asks for this blessing, and receives it for that matter. The And so then we go back to talking about the children of Judah in verses 20 and 21. Um, and a lot of these places are ones that we can still find today, but there are some that have become lost over time. And so I wish I had more to provide you, more anecdotes, but I regrettably couldn't find too much with these. But uh, the last verse is of particular importance to this chapter. And as for the Jebusites, the inhabitants of Jerusalem, the children of Judah could not drive them out, but the Jebusites dwell with the children of Judah at Jerusalem unto this day. And we can understand why Jerusalem was hard to conquer. Being set up on a hill made it very easy to defend. But this failure is an issue. It's a reflection of the failing of the uh, Israelites to really drive the Canaanites out. But this failure is not unique to the children of Judah. It's going to be typical of all the tribes to not be able to drive out the Canaanites. Um, Now, in chapter 16, I apologize. I know usually I break it with questions and things at each chapter, but seeing how well these two dovetail, I've kind of skipped that this time. Now, the children of Joseph fell from Jordan by Jericho, and we begin to see more of what's going on. But in verse 10, we see that the uh, Canaanites are being forced uh, by the Ephraimites to serve under tribute. So they become forced laborers. And Ephraim's guilty of a bad compromise. The the people, the Israelites, were to drive out the Canaanites out of this promised land. And instead, they've decided to go for this convenience of easy labor. And this is a disobedience towards God, who has given them the kingdom, but yet they don't seem to want to seize it the right way. Um, Again, since we're talking about this land, this is that pink area here. Um, but uh, and chapter 16 is a fairly short chapter. Um, but they did not drive out the Canaanites, and they wanted the Israelites. There are two reasons they didn't really conquer. One, they wanted peace, and second, they probably wanted wealth for that matter. This was ease of difficulty and money, and they disobeyed God and fell short of what He wanted for them. And we often do that ourselves. We say, well, somebody else can take care of that, or I don't really want to do that because it's a lot of effort. We all fall prey to this. So it's very easy to look at them and scoff and go, "Oh, I would have done differently." But we have a different task ahead of us, but that doesn't make us any less culpable of when we do the same thing. Um, Manasseh and Ephraim are very large tribes, and their numbers are greater than any single one tribe. Oh wait, that's nope, not yet. Sorry, I'm ahead of myself. Uh, so while I'm here, let's go ahead and open this up for questions or comments. Any thoughts? Anyone with questions?
Matt, there's one interesting thing that I noticed there. You mentioned the last verse there in chapter, what was it, chapter 15, where it says that the sons of Judah were not able to drive out the Jebusites from Jerusalem,
Mm-hmm.
uh, because Jerusalem itself was actually in the territory of Benjamin, um, which will show up in chapter 18. But the border between Benjamin and Judah actually ran through the valley of Hinnom, which is on the south side of Jerusalem. Eventually, got known as Gehenna, the place that Jesus described as hell.
Mm-hmm.
And so I found that fascinating. I don't really have an answer or an explanation, but where it said there in verse 63 that the sons of Judah could not drive them out, it actually was part of the territory of Benjamin.
Now that's interesting. What would you say is the significance of that being the tribe of Benjamin? Like, just to push you a little further on that.
I'm not really sure. It, it it obviously becomes a very significant city that David chooses to make it his capital, and as since the borderline really ran through this creek or this uh, brook that was on the south side of the city, you could almost say that it was, straddling the line between Judah and Benjamin. But to me, it's just fascinating that this passage would essentially blame the sons of Judah for not conquering a city that was actually in the territory of Benjamin.
I really appreciate that. That's not something I would have arrived at on my own. So thank you for contributing that. Any other thoughts, questions, concerns? Okay. Let's go ahead and continue. So in chapter 17, we see that the tribe of Manasseh is the tribe of Manasseh, and we read about Machir, the firstborn son of Manasseh, who was a man of war, and he had Gilead and Bashan. Well, the tribe of Manasseh is a massive group, and um, Manasseh and Ephraim are both very large tribes, but they complain here that they have not been allotted adequate land. And Joshua replies to them, um, saying, "Why hast thou given?" Or sorry, in verse 14 we read, "Why hast thou given me but one lot and one portion to inherit, seeing I am a great people? For as much as the Lord hath blessed me hitherto." And Joshua answers them and says, "If you are a great people, go ahead and take it. Go take the land." And this is wise because Joshua doesn't commit himself to anything. He he encourages them to take it onto themselves to go do this thing. He encourages them to realize that this work is theirs, and without really ever saying it, says, if you were doing what God had told you to do, you would have received the land that you've been granted. But tells them to go up to the wood country that the Perizzites live in, and the giants. And um, the tribes hadn't taken it because unto this point it was very difficult work and it would have been dangerous for them. But Joshua encourages them to do what they're supposed to. And so we see this massive tribe who is not at all like Caleb. Caleb was ready and biting at the bit to go take what was his, and the land that God would have him receive, or the land that God would grant him. And here we are with this tribe of Manasseh, and great warriors at that, who are like, well, we'd like more help, or we'd like others to come in and do this for us. And this easy land is something that's going to continue to be a problem. Um, there's a commentary I've been reading that says that they tried to appeal to Joshua because he's a fellow Ephraimite, but nothing to support that here in the text. But it's not without some possible merit. Um, and that's chapter 17. So moving on ahead in chapter 18, at this point there are still 7 tribes who haven't yet received their inheritance. So the children of Israel assemble at Shiloh and begin to set up the tabernacle there, and begin discussing things with each other. Now, these other 7 tribes hadn't received their inheritance, and who knows why they haven't done this, whether it's a slowing, a reluctance to continue because the successes haven't been coming in the way that they were, or maybe it's the fact that these people have been nomads their entire life. So the idea of settling down and switching gears to something, something solid and less way or less what's the word I'm looking for here? Something with something less nomadic just doesn't make sense for them. Probably because the people, but anyway, they're not doing what the Lord's commanded. And so Joshua asks them, how long are you going to go neglect this? And neglect is such a perfect word for this, because regardless of whatever was going on, God had called them to do this very thing. And they were neglecting that order and that command from God. So they're not fulfilling what the Lord would have them do. Um, so Joshua says, um, describe the land into 7 parts, and we will cast lots. And this is the second time in Joshua that we read about casting lots. The Eleazar, the chief priest, was elected by casting lots, and so here we see that again. But Joshua casts those lots and divides the land according to their divisions in chapter 18. Um, so sorry. Then is that here? Um, and the children of Benjamin begin receiving their quarter, and we see the lines drawn here for it. Let's see, do I have? No, I don't. Let's get back to a map, and here you can see we earlier described the space of Judah, and just above it is the tribe of Benjamin's area, lot that's granted them. For those of you who are just joining by phone, I really wish I could show you this image because it helps portray it so well. But it's just north of the sea, the uh, the Salt Sea or Dead Sea. Uh, Too far. Okay. And so we continue to see more locations drawn out, and these things are recorded, so that we can have this as a reference and know where different uh, property lines lie, if you will. But and I really wish I could have come up with something to help illustrate why this is so crucial for these chapters. But in chapter 19, we discuss Simeon and dividing things for their tribe. Uh, and for Simeon, you see it down here at the very bottom of this map, right here next to the Hormah and Jephthah mountain ranges, and these different families are granted their villages. Now in sorry, in verse 49, after everyone has been granted their land, Joshua receives his little piece of land, and he's granted whatever it is that he asks for. So he receives this little piece of land that was promised to him, but he does so last. He's the conqueror of this thing. He's the leader of the entire people for God. I mean, and this humble service, he just asks for this small space. That red dot that you can see in this map is where Joshua would claim his land, and this image here is thought to be the location of Joshua's tomb in what's now known as Kifl Haris, near Nablus on the west bank. But I thought that was very neat to get to see his burial place. And as you can see, it's very well traveled, and people even do observe different religious things here. You can see two ladies praying on the right hand wall of this tomb. But it's kind of, for Joshua, this is a something that's granted to him at the end of so many campaigns and so many victories, and hard-earned victory for the people granted to them by God. I'm going to open this up for thoughts, questions. Anyone have anything they'd like to share, or anything that they're curious about? Okay, we'll go ahead and move forward then. So in chapter 20, we switch gears, and we're not really discussing territorial lines anymore, but the Lord speaks to Joshua, telling him that we're now to create cities of refuge. And this is, God now tells Joshua to fulfill what Moses would have done in Numbers 35, and creating 6 cities of refuge. So cities of refuge are these places where someone who accidentally commits manslaughter, not outright murder, but someone who murders accidentally or unintentionally, can go to these cities. And if you flee to said city, anyone who pursues you, whether it's a family member or someone who's been appointed to pursue you, once you are in that city, you cannot be drawn out. You can't be taken from this refuge. And so anyone who would try to avenge has to wait, because the priests, the priests will then get together and discuss. Whether the elders of the city will gather them up and will eventually discuss it amongst themselves, and ultimately make a decision. And until the death of the high priest, that person could then leave and return to his house. But this, but this principle of not of capital punishment for manslaughter goes all the way back to Genesis 9, because shedding another man's blood, is unacceptable, because God made man, and so watching man kill man is unacceptable. And God protects people. God is creating this refuge in order to protect those who otherwise might not receive fair trial, and especially those who would be put to death for something that was not truly their fault, in the strictest, in the sense that it was accidental, or that it was unwitting. But the people would need to have eyewitnesses. If they were to, the avenger would need to get 2 or 3 eyewitnesses, and as we read in Deuteronomy 17. But let's see, what else do I have here? But the case would be heard by the elders of the city, and they would hear him out. And these elders would have to constantly be hearing from people at the gates of the city, really bringing in those uh, that would need this, and stating that case at the city gates, that because there would be people who would commit murder and need to try to run to these cities, but hearing this case and deliberating upon it would be essential to making sure that these did not become abused. um, but they weren't to deliver the slayer, they weren't to deliver whoever slayed the person into the hand of an avenger. This was a place where they could be free. And while while the Jewish people have these cities of refuge, for us there's no similar setup. But God is our refuge and our strength. He's present for us when we're in trouble, and we read that throughout 15 times throughout Psalms. So um, whenever we feel, I mean, hopefully none of us ever commit accidental murder, but we should always think that no matter what our stressor is, that God is our salvation, and He is our refuge throughout anything. Um, that went a lot faster than I thought it was gonna. Um, are there any thoughts, questions? I was afraid of that. Um, I will resume in chapter 20 or 21, and we'll try to get through chapter 24 next week. Um, I will be in Florida at that point. I will still try to present. Hopefully there won't be a delay. If there becomes an issue and it's truly just not working, I will either I will do something to remedy that. But I'll try to make every effort next Sunday to make sure that we have the evening service as scheduled. But just a heads up that there may be a technical difficulty there. But again, I'm going to try not to let that occur. Um, that's all I have for today. I really appreciate your all's time. Um, I apologize. I really wish I had enough to fill out the time until 6:30. Um, would Mike, would you be willing to lead us in a closing prayer?
Yes. Let's bow together. Our Father in heaven, we humbly come before you. We're very grateful for today, the beginning of another week where we can be your children. We can represent you in the community, and we can spread the gospel. We're thankful for the lesson we had today, this morning, and then at the Bible class that Matt's presented for us this evening. Please help us to remain faithful to you during all the difficult times that we may encounter in our lives. Help us to trust, continue be with our congregation uh, as Dempsey's about to come and Dina, and we pray that we'll welcome them into our group and that we can work together to spread the gospel. Pray that you would give us strength to overcome the temptations that we encounter and forgive us for evil. And all these things we pray through Christ. Amen.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful night, and see you Wednesday.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Matt.
you,
You
Matt.
had a
Thanks,
busy
Matt.
day. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan.
Matt.
Put that
Yeah,
down,
of course.
please. Put that down.
Happy to do it.
You be careful.
You too.
All right, honey. Love y'all.